Hi everyone, it's Celeste and welcome back to my channel. Like in my previous video, I created a dress and used it for 4 different costumes. These costumes were very easy to make, but first we need this dress to begin our outfit. I created this dress using 2 different patterns and you'll see those in a moment. I also hope you guys enjoy this video, and if you are very interested in more fashion videos and costume videos, please subscribe to my channel if you haven't already so you can catch all the other videos in this series. So, without further ado, let's get this video started. For the fabric of this dress, I'm going to be using this bright sunflower yellow stretched taffeta fabric. I got this in LA Fashion District at Villa Tex. This was only about $3 a yard, and it is by far fun and easy to work with, and it has a stretch and it's beautiful and shiny. I used about 2 yards. Now I'm using Quick Sew pattern 3502. We are only going to be using the bottom skirt pattern. And this is because it's a very full circle skirt, and make sure that it is long enough. Again, I'm using the bodice top of M6343 of McCall's Costumes. And obviously, you know, it's a basic bodice pattern that I really love and such. Begin by placing out your pattern. So this is the full circle skirt right there, and then some of the bodice pieces. I'm going to be using the second half of the skirt, creating an even bigger circle skirt, and I'm going to be pinning down the bodice. Then of course cut it out. Because the 2 circle skirts took up a lot of the fabric, I used a lot of the scrap pieces and I still followed it on the grain of the fabric, and I still pinned it in place because I had enough space to cut out the bodice pieces versus having 2 incomplete skirts. So continue working with your fabric. Following the design of M6343, we are going to assemble the bodice by pinning the front side, the side back, and the back to themselves. And then of course, sew it all together. Because I don't want a seam in the front of my skirt part of the dress, I definitely am going to cut one of the circle skirts in half. So line it up perfectly so that the hem reaches each other line and it's a perfect donut in half. Then cut on the fold. When you have finished cutting the other one completely in half, take out your other skirt and cut one cut in it. This way it is just open and you can attach the other pieces to it to make a mega skirt. Take your big skirt piece and attach it with the 2 little pieces on both sides of the cut, and now you're going to sew it together. This is going to create the skirt even bigger and fuller. After I finished assembling the skirt, I decided to add horsehair to the bottom of the skirt. At the hem, you are going to be adding horsehair braid, and this is because the skirt is very full and you want it to be kind of wavy. So we are using this. This is a plastic little ribbon that's woven around, and it will definitely create nice little folds in the fabric when you gather it. This is very easy to get, and if you remember, I got this in Amsterdam for very cheap. Begin by placing the horsehair braid at the hem of your skirt on the right side of the fabric. This is because we're going to flip over the hem and sew the horsehair on the inside when we are done. Make sure you have enough horsehair to go all around your skirt hemline. For this, I'm actually using a simple straight stitch. What I like to usually do is just take my whole roll of horsehair and leave it on until I get very close to the edge. You don't want to stretch your horsehair and you don't want it to run short. When I'm finished, I definitely backstitch 3 times and then I cut it as soon as the fabric is done. Here you can see the horsehair on the front. Now I'm going to flip it back to the back side, and this will create a very nice seam at the hemline, and we're going to be sewing on top of the horsehair. Make sure to change your color of your thread to match your fabric and then begin sewing it down. This will take a long time. Take your time so that you don't pucker the fabric, and you know, it's sewing. So if you mess up, always be able to seam rip it out just like I'm doing here. I actually messed up the weave, so be careful when starting again. There are a few different ways to attach horsehair braid. This is the way that I know how to use it, and I like how it gives that little bit of extra detail at the edge. You can hand slip stitch this, but at the same time, I think it's stronger if you just sew it directly down. If you have a larger braid line, it's going to increase the hemline. This is what the finished edge looks like because I use a very thin one, but obviously it looks very clean and professional, and it's only one seam versus two. This is what the bodice looks like on my dress form. I definitely don't like this little triangle cut in the front from the pattern. Obviously I could have chose a different pattern, but this is one of my favorites. So I'm marking where I want to cut off that piece so it just lays nicely on my hips versus creating that little triangle in the front. And then I will be cutting that out. Next, I hand gathered the skirt, and by doing this, I used a running stitch and then I pulled the thread. And I did this to match the bottom base of the bodice. If yours doesn't fit yet, keep pulling, and if you want to see a tutorial on how to gather fabrics, let me know with a comment down below if you're very interested. The biggest point is that you definitely want your thread to be able to match, just in case it pokes out. And as you can see here, I am just going through the fabric with a hand needle, going back and forth on the fabric, and then I pull. That way it reaches to the edge, and that way I pin it to the bodice knowing that I have enough space or if I need to pull more. This is what the skirt looks like attached to the bodice, and you can fully see how the dress is starting to take shape. The bodice top, I already went ahead and serged it using some thread and my sewing machine. And make sure your skirt lays the way you want it to, then use a running stitch and add it to the bodice. Make sure to serge the edge of the bodice hem and you'll be good. Now I took out a scrap piece of fabric from that same cut, and I'm going to be cutting strips so I make the straps. The straps, I needed 2 of them, so make sure to cut 2 straps. Be sure to cut a steady hand or use a ruler if you don't know how to cut a straight line, and that's okay. And then we are going to fold these strips in half and sew it down the sewing machine. Now, when you are finished making your straps, fold it inside out using a loop turner or a really long pokey stick such as a knitting needle. I don't have a loop turner, so I'm going to be turning it inside out using a knitting needle. And all you have to do is make sure you push one of the sides in and begin pulling. If you haven't noticed already, you want to close one of the edges and then push it through. A loop turner, you hook the fabric on the loop and then you push it through the fabric. Obviously, I don't have one, so this will have to be a visual representation. Push the pokey part through the entire little tube of fabric that you've created for your straps. And then slowly work your way down until your tube end comes out the end of the fabric strip. Once all of it has been flipped out and the seam is on the inside, we are now going to sew down this puppy. So I'm going to be just flattening it, finger pressing it down before it gets to the sewing foot. And this way I have a nice, very clean little strap. This way I don't have any twisting, turning, puffiness that I don't want, and it gives a very nice polished look. Do this for both straps. After seeing how this strap turned out, I decided to add a second seam on the other side of the strap. This is because I wanted it to have a little bit more personality, puncture, and a statement. So I sewed 2 lines on both straps. One on the left side and then one on the right side. Here I'm hemming the bodice top using just one running stitch, and I'm slowly finger pressing it down and going there. Once I reach the top of the bodice piece where it has the triangle part, I'm going to attach one of the straps and I'm going just to sew it down, and I'm going to go over it and then continue hemming the top of the bodice. Do this on both sides. The reason why we are attaching and hemming at the same time is because you don't want to have extra stitches where they don't need to be. This is just simplifying it. Now I added the zipper. The zipper is actually pretty easy to install, but first I sewed this back seam all together and then I added a yellow matching zipper. This is about 20 inches long, so it goes down the back and into the skirt a little bit. So there are a few different ways to add zippers. I sewed the dress together first, making sure that the hemline and the seam line on the back match, and then I sewed the zipper on top of it. Then I went back with a seam ripper and opened the seam, revealing the nice zipper. You'll have to take a few times learning this step. I'm also very terrible at it, so practice makes perfect. You know, I've inserted zippers many different ways, from hand sewing and machine sewing and gluing. I highly recommend just go for what you can do, and if this is just a costume, do what you're comfortable with. If you want it to last, start practicing. Also, don't forget to finish the straps by sewing it to the back of the bodice on the dress, and then you should be done. Make sure to repeat that on the other side, use a tape measure to make sure it's even, and then wear your dress. Ta-da! This is how I made my yellow dress for my 4-in-1 costume look. Obviously, this might be a little bit hard to make with the horsehair, but no one says you have to add the horsehair. You can leave it as a regular roll hem, or you could add lace at the bottom, make it your own design, but clearly this is how I made mine. If you have any questions, make sure to leave them in a comment down below. If you like this video, like that button and click it hard. And then subscribe if you haven't already for more DIY tutorials and to see the rest of this short mini series. Thanks so much for watching and supporting my channel, and I look forward to seeing you in another video.